Thank you again so much for coming and joining today. I'm really excited to be talking about one of my favorite topics with one of my favorite communities, Be Social Change. So I'm a proud Be Social Change member and advocate, and I would encourage you, if you're not already a member, to join. It's a really fantastic community, and there's a lot of knowledge sharing and just excitement around kind of broad social impact topics. So it's definitely worth checking out if you're unfamiliar. So I'm Eliza. I am the founder of Green Buoy Consulting, and I started Green Buoy in 2018. I actually started it as a school project. I did the Harvard Extension School's master's program in sustainability and became interested and curious about sustainability for small private companies. And I wanted to help that size of companies develop sustainability strategies and have access to the same kind of sustainability help and focus that big companies had. So since 2018, that's what I've been doing. I help companies around kind of broad ES&G expertise, so environmental, social, and governance. I do a lot of carbon footprint analysis. I do a lot of materiality assessment and kind of broad ESG strategy, as well as B Corp certification for companies. So in the past 3 years, I've done about 10 B Corp certifications. So I've looked at companies across industries, different types of companies, different sizes, and helped them go through their assessment and do the certification. So I say that because I can then share everything that I've learned from going through those assessments. So I like talking about ways of approaching the assessment and different kind of tips or tricks that you can use. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today, so that you can feel more empowered to do the assessment on your own. So just a brief agenda. I'm going to talk about kind of what B Corp is, why people are interested in it. I'm going to deep dive into how the process works, go through tips and tricks, kind of common mistakes I see, how you can make your assessment better, and talk through the process. First, what is B Corp certification? So I think most of us have seen the seal that looks like that little bee. We see it on products, we see it on people's websites. And I like to talk about B Corp certification as a standard that legally certifies your company to a social and environmental standard. So B Corp requires that you complete an about 180 question assessment. You have to legally change your business designation from an LLC or S Corp to a benefit corporation. You meet with B Lab, who's the company that runs B Corp. They look at your assessment, and then you become part of the B Corp community. So when we say social and environmental, B Corp, the assessment, B Lab will look at your company in 5 main areas. So it will look at community, governance, environment, customers, and workers. So every question that you answer is based on those 5 areas, and it will ask you questions based on those different things. And then I think the other kind of signal of B Corp, in a way to explain it, is to look at companies that are certified. So Patagonia is a B Corp, Ben & Jerry's, Athleta, Eileen Fisher. There's now, I think, over 4,000 B Corps in the world. So that is across industries, across geographies. There are a ton of companies that have gone to this standard, and more are becoming certified every day. So I think the main kind of takeaway when we think about what B Corp certification is it is truly a certification. It is not a kind of checkbox. It's not something that you can pay to get. You have to go through a whole assessment and go through the process with B Lab to get it done. And that's what I'm going to talk about in more detail, but it is important to think of it too as a kind of social and environmental standard. So why are people doing this? Why are companies interested? B Corp has said that they have seen like a 3-fold increase in applicants over the past 3 years. So more and more people are becoming B Corps, which I think is really exciting. It's really great. And I get a lot of questions about why are people doing this? So I think the main reason, the kind of obvious reason, is that social and environmental standard. Companies are really interested in looking at, examining, and improving their own social and environmental standards. So as sustainability and ESG become more topical, a lot of companies don't really know where to start or what to do. And B Corp is a really powerful way to look at different issues, material issues to your company, ways that you can be acting to that social and environmental standard. And it's a way to say, we are having an environmental benefit. Here's what it is. So that's a big benefit that companies realize externally and internally. So just at a baseline, you're already getting the social and environmental benefit. The other benefits, I think the kind of initial wave of B Corps were a lot of consumer goods companies. So if you think about baby food, if you think about any food or clothes, if you're comparing things, you can look at the B Corp standard and say, this is probably better for the environment because of the B Corp. So I think for consumer goods companies, it's a little bit more obvious what the benefits are. The other benefits that I think are growing, again, in tandem with this kind of wave of sustainability excitement. The first example here is Tom from a life insurance company. He's talking about the benefits that he sees. So he's saying people want to do business with people that they trust. So they're a service-based business. They're partnering with people, they're getting vendors, they're getting clients. B Corp to them is a big trust signifier to them. So I think that's kind of a cool example for people that say, is B Corp right for my industry? If you're doing business with other businesses, a lot of companies are. If you have vendors, a lot of companies are. It's another signifier that I think is kind of a cool example of why companies are doing it. The other thing that I think is really exciting, and I've seen this across kind of ESG, sustainability as a whole, for why more companies are thinking about this and doing it, is hiring. People want to work at companies that share their values. They want to work at companies where they're making a difference. And Tiffany from TMI Consulting, this is the second quote, she's saying that she doesn't have to search for staff. They come to her. People are finding her, which I think, on its face is fantastic, but I think it's really cool that she's basically cut recruiting. She's not spending money on recruiting anymore. If she was, she's just having people apply to our company because they're a B Corp. So I think as we look at both why companies are doing this, and if you're your own company, thinking about what the benefits are, who you're hoping to kind of engage with around this, I think it's just exciting to talk about and think about. Okay, so let's get into the certification process. I'm going to give just a brief overview now, and then I'll give into each section and more details on what each part of the process looks like. So I like to think of B Corp certification as kind of three main steps. So the first is that you're completing that assessment. So that assessment that I talked about that has the 5 areas, workers, customers, you're answering all those questions. You have to score 80 points or more to become certified. Once you've completed the assessment, you've gotten more than 80 points, then you send in that assessment. Then the next part comes in. Then you're verifying with B-Lab. You're meeting with them. You're talking through your answers. That's when you go back and forth and show proof, and they'll say, tell us more about this, tell us more about that. You're having a conversation with them to make sure that what you've said is true. And then the kind of final piece is the legal requirement. So again, I think this is something that makes B Corp specific compared to other certifications. I have to say I'm not a lawyer, so I can't answer specific legal questions. But to become a B Corp, you have to change your legal status to a benefit corporation. And what that means really is, compared to a traditional LLC or S Corp, those companies are built to provide value to shareholders. They're designed to give money back to their shareholders at all costs. So in a traditional model, this is an extreme example, but If you say, well, we can cut down this entire forest and build our new farm and it will be great because our shareholders will get more money from it. For an LLC, that's great. Everybody will agree because that is profit. A legal benefit corporation has to consider the benefits it's having to society. So for most companies, that looks like a model of what I call it's called triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. So a B Corp is saying our benefit will be XYZ, and you're talking about the benefit. So instead of a purely profit first, the owners of the company, the executives of the company are saying, we will take these benefits into account and they will be equally considered with profitability. So I think it's just another benefit of B Corp, but it makes people a little wary, but it is something that's required. So I do like to share that and talk about that. Okay, so let's talk about what the assessment looks like and how to go about it. So when you go on B Lab's website, if you Google B Impact Assessment, B Corp Assessment, you'll see it come up. And again, it's about 180 questions. It can seem a little overwhelming at first. Any company can start an assessment. You don't have to pay to start the assessment. It's free to do. So you'll answer a couple of initial questions about your industry. You'll answer questions about your company size, and then it will start to go through questions in these areas. So it will ask you governance questions. So things like, do you have a code of ethics? Do you have a board? How many members are on your board? Different environmental questions, everything from environmental policies that you have in place. Do you do any environmental auditing? Are you collecting information on waste, on water, on energy? Community questions are things like supplier code of conduct. Are you engaging with your community in a way that you're giving money? How are you interacting with the community around you? Customer questions are things more like how are you interacting with customers? Do you have data privacy policies? Are you collecting information from them? And then worker questions are things like, do you give employees health insurance? Do you give benefits? Are you collecting diversity information on employees? If so, what are you doing with that information? So there's different questions around those areas, and each of those are weighted according to your size and industry. So for example, if you are a product company, they're not going to ask you any more service-based questions. Whereas if you're a service company, they're not going to ask you, does your product do this? Does your product do this? So it is kind of industry specific. The biggest thing to think about in the assessment, and the biggest takeaway, I think, from this discussion, and just as you think about completing it, is that every question that you answer has to be accompanied by documentation and proof. So if you're saying, here's our supplier code of conduct, you need to show your supplier code of conduct. If you're saying, hey, we're 1% for the planet members, you're showing certification of membership and you're showing how much money you've donated. So it truly is an assessment that is looking at the way that your business operates and the way that you're doing business on a day-to-day. It's not well, we're thinking about doing this, or we're kind of doing this, or we do this, but it's not written down. You need to show documentation and proof for each answer and question that you're doing in the assessment. So it's sorted by area. I think it's easy to use, and that you just kind of click around and see what area you want to look at and what one you want to move to. So that's my kind of initial assessment recommendation. The other piece that I think is definitely essential when we think about the Be Social Change community is what's called impact business models. So this is another part of the assessment, and impact business models, sort of broadly defined, are different categories and specifications that when you look at your business, you say, our business model is designed to provide XYZ social or environmental benefit. So when you think about a company like Bombas or Tom's that has a 1-for-1 model, so Bombas, for every pair of socks they sell, they give one to a local shelter. So different models or ways of doing business that are a way that your business is already set up and running and that you're deriving revenue from. So if you go onto the B-Lab website, I'll share this at the end too if anybody wants it. They have specific guidelines for what impact business models exist. And as you're going through, it will ask you questions and you can determine if that fits in with your business. So if you think and are looking and say, I think I have an impact business model, it will ask you some questions that will kind of give you some checks and balances to make sure that that's true. And when you go through and you say, okay, we think this is true. For example, the same Tom's Bombas model. Okay, we do 1-for-1 donations. They're going to say, great, tell us how many socks you've sold, what's the revenue matched to that, and then what's the equivalent revenue with donations. And you're going to show receipts and proof of those donations. So it's helpful to think about the model and make sure that it makes sense for your business. But conversely, if you can prove it, it can be a big source of points. So I say that especially here because I know that a lot of us have businesses that are already designed to do something good. And those businesses can be a really significant match for B Corp and an easier path to get certified because the way that you're doing business is made for a benefit. The other piece about impact business models is there are different impact business models for each area. So there's like a workers specific one. There's a customer's specific one. And as you go through, it will become clear which business model is the one for your area. So if you think this might apply to you and you're going through the assessment, there's different resources on B-Lab's website. I definitely recommend checking them out. And if you had never considered B Corp until today and you think, oh, I think I have an impact business model, B Corp is going to be a great opportunity for you because it will be easier for you to go through the assessment. So it kind of works both ways. Okay, here I want to talk about some kind of tips and tricks, common cues. That will be my next kind of couple slides. So far and away, the most common question that I get about B-Lab and the assessment and certification is how long will it take? Unfortunately, the answer is it depends, which I know is not a great answer, but it totally depends on your business, depends on your industry, depends on the size, depends on so many different factors. So if you're thinking, how long will this take me? It will be helpful for you to think about the size of your company. Most of us are business owners that are probably already working 40 plus hours a week. So if you don't have a lot of time to give to this, it will take longer. It's fine if you don't, but unless you have a big, 2-week break and you want to start really jamming on B Corp, it usually takes most companies, the average, very, very rough average is 4 to 6 months. So this is not something that you kind of start and finish in a week. I say give it 4 to 6 months just for your own sanity, just so that this isn't all that you're doing. And you can allocate time to think about it in that way. The other important thing, and I'll talk about this when we get to it, is there is the timeline for the assessment, and then there is the timeline for certification. So because B-Lab has had a 3-fold increase in applicants, there's a queue now. So there is anywhere from 6 to 12 months of waiting once you submit. So it definitely takes time to go through the assessment, but it also takes time on B-Lab's end to verify everything and assign you an analyst and get those different things. So that's how I would think about kind of framing. And as I go through some of the more tips and tricks, I think that will help people consider this. So the other question that I think is interesting to think about on sort of a number of levels is a lot of companies will say, well, I don't do anything environmental. Is that okay? I don't have a one-to-one model. Is that okay? And because the assessment is 180 questions, the 80 points are not for specific areas. So some companies have 0 points in some areas and then are really, really strong in other areas, which I think is great just from a pure kind of broad social and environmental benefit way of thinking. But it also helps if you're a company and you go through the assessment and you say, wow, we have a lot of really strong community policies. We have a big piece of our company that's community engagement. If you find that and you're going through the assessment and that is true, keep with that. Keep with the workers, keep with whatever area you look at and say, we're really strong in this. We're really excited about that. Use that first and then kind of move outward. So definitely play to your strengths and figure out what you're already doing well and how B Corp kind of fits with that. The last question is, how much does it cost? So this is all available on B Lab's website. They update fees pretty often. So if you Google B Corp fees, B Lab fees, there's a nice sheet and page that comes up. The costs and fees are determined based on revenue. So the more revenue you have, the higher your costs will be. And it shows that again on their website. There is now a cost to submit. They've added a submission fee, I think, to help keep people that are less serious away from just kind of submitting for fun. So there is a new submission fee, and then the annual fee is based on your revenue. So go on the website and it will show you what those are. So what are some common mistakes that I see? I think the first one, and again, as we're thinking about, is this right for my business? Is this something I should be doing? I have seen, again, especially as B Corp becomes more popular, there's been companies that just see the seal and are like, oh, that sounds great. I want that. I want this on my website. And then they go in the assessment and they think, well, I don't want to incorporate environmental benefits. I want a shareholder first model. That will not be great for B Corp. Which is fine. But if you're in this mindset of, I don't know if this is right for my business, I think that the assessment does a good job of the way it asks questions, the way that it talks about things. You'll know pretty quickly, this is something that matches with my culture or matches with the business culture that I'm trying to grow, or this seems like a lot of effort for something when we just want to do shareholder first. So again, either is fine, but it is a lot of work, a lot of effort for something that, unless this is throughout your business and this is your culture, it's going to be a lot more work. The other common mistake, and I actually don't know if you can do this anymore. I hope that the assessment has been updated, but people submitting below 80 points. So as you're going through the assessment, you can see your score, which I think is fantastic. And I've talked to people that say, well, I got to 65 and then I pressed submit, and then B Lab didn't do anything for me. They thought that B Lab would sort of meet them halfway and would help move them through. B Lab does a lot of stuff. They will not help you raise your points. So do not submit your assessment if your score is below 80 points, because B Lab probably won't talk to you, and you'll have to get even more of a jump to finish the assessment. So it does say, and we talked about this earlier, 80 points is the cutoff for certification. It's the cutoff for certification. So most companies, after they submit, lose at least 5 points. Most of them it's closer to 10. Because as you're going back and forth with B Lab, they're saying, well, this policy isn't really this, or this is actually close to this, but it doesn't work. So for your own peace of mind, for my own peace of mind, I do not submit an assessment below 90 points. just to be safe, if it takes an extra 3 months to get to 90, it's 3 months well spent, because you don't want to meet with them and then be below 80 and then you're back at the beginning and then you're going through the whole thing again. So just keep the kind of scoring in mind, and don't submit below 80. Don't submit at 82. You can submit at 85 if you feel super comfortable. That would make me extremely nervous. But if 85 is where you feel comfortable, do it. 90 is best. And some people, that's not a problem. Some people are at 110 and are living a great B impact assessment, and they can just submit. So don't submit below 80. The other thing that I've said multiple times, it bears repeating, that you need to provide documentation for every single thing that you've answered. Documentation means proof, it means existing policies, it means receipts. So if you have said, oh, we are hosting a XYZ, food bank drive, and we host it every month, eLab will never know. We can just say that. They will ask you to show proof of that. How much food did you give? Who came? Same with any kind of measurement that you're doing. There's a question about, what bank do you have? And if your bank's a B Corp, you get more points. You have to show proof that that is your bank. So don't think of documentation as a nice to have. It is definitely a need to have. So more optimistically, here are some kind of tips and tricks that I think it's helpful to think about when you're doing the assessment. So the first is transparency. I think it is great, and I think it's really helpful that the assessment shows you exactly where you are. It shows you how many points you have. It shows you how many points each question is worth. So if you're looking and you say, we have 7 people on our board and 2 of them identify as women or minorities, that's worth this many points. If we're changing our board in the next year and we change that to 4, you can see how many points that is. When you're looking at each thing, you can tell how much each is worth. So I think that's helpful just when kind of planning and thinking about, oh my gosh, how much is left? What does this mean? What does this look like? There's a little learn more button on each question where it will show you, we mean this by this. So in that same kind of vein, while B-Lab will not be happy if you submit at 60 points, B-Lab wants as many people to become B Corps as possible. And their website, their newsletter is excellent. There's so many different resources about supplier engagement, about different employee things. They're doing webinars all the time talking about why B Corp is good and how to do it. So there's a ton of just resources and help and guidance that they've provided that they hide, I think, a little bit. But if you know where to look and you Google, the resources are there, and they're definitely worth using. So the other thing, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but make the assessment work for you. So if you have really fantastic environmental policies, a lot of environmental efforts, use that. Start with that, go hard on those, and then kind of fill in everything else. That I also want you to think about strengths from how do we attack this assessment? So I've seen companies that will say, okay, we want to have this attached to this month's OKRs. We're assigning different employees this for the next 4 months. This is how we do goal setting. This is how we set up initiatives, and we're going to do B Corp the same. Whereas other companies are super collaborative and want 10 people to look at one thing. That's fine. It doesn't matter what you're doing, but think about how you like to work and how you think about things, and use and look at B Corp in a similar way. That will help you with the assessment. And again, the assessment is transparent. You can see how many points. You can download an Excel version. You can download a PDF. You can add as many team members as you want. So you can say, hey, Brian, you're doing workers, and then someone from finance is doing the governance piece. There's ways to make the assessment work for you. So similarly, again, this could be exciting to some people, not exciting to other people. I recommend that you set up a timeline. It doesn't have to be, again, something that's like 4 months, we're going hard at this. If you have an 8-month timeline and you do a half an hour every other week for 8 months, you're going to get really, really far. Probably finish. I have talked to so many companies, and this is not to degrade them or to be rude, but people I talked to 8 months ago that said, okay, well, we don't have time to do this, or we're not going to start, but we really want to do it. We really want to do it. If they had said at that time, we're going to take 20 minutes every other week, they would be in a great position now. So you don't have to think of it as something that's like, hurry, 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 hurry. I think it's better to have a long view, think of it as an annual thing, and then just work consistently toward that. Again, depending on how you work, depending on how your business works, that could be exciting to some people and less exciting to other people. So just think about those kinds of things. So I want to talk next about the verification process. This, not to scare you, this process stresses me out every single time I want to call with a client, every single time we're talking to B-Lab. It makes me really nervous. So if you're nervous about it, we're all nervous about it. So the way to be less nervous about it is to be prepared. So if you have done the assessment, you have your documentation for each thing, you will be in a great position and there's no need to be worried. If you're at 93 points and you have proof of every single question that you've answered, you're good. Don't worry. Obviously, that's not helpful to say don't worry, but you're in a great position. And B-Lab will know that and will be working with you to do that. So the way the verification works is that you'll meet with B-Lab. They'll mark different things in your assessment. You'll go back and forth. And they'll say, hey, let's talk about your supplier code of conduct. Tell us about that, show us it, and you talk through it. And then once they verified everything and checked everything, then you move to the next phase, which is kind of legal and fees. I did mention earlier, there is a big B Corp queue. So a lot of people are getting verified right now. A lot of people want to talk to B Corp. So the more prepared you can be, when you're answering questions and going back and forth with them, they'll say, great, you have 30 days to do this, or you have XYZ amount of time. The quicker you can be, not always, sometimes they need the 30 days, but you can use that time frame to help you. So just something else to kind of to think about in verification. Okay, and then legal and fees. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I can't talk about this. I do want to stress that the legal requirement is not optional. Every company that becomes certified has to do the legal change. It depends on your size and location. I think there are some things with legacy companies that are still kind of moving, but the legal requirement is not optional. You do have to do it. The assessment will guide you and tell you how to do it. And then depending on your size, they'll talk more about when the legal part is required, how to submit it, and how to show proof of that. So, and again, the B-Lab website has a really, I think, helpful, this is what the legal process means, this is what the fees mean, you select your state, you select your current designation, and it will tell you what that looks like for you. So I just have a couple more slides before we get into questions. So again, I think I get some questions, and just as B Corp becomes more popular, people are like, well, what are the pros and cons? And how, is this good? Is this bad? Is this something I should do? And I think the main kind of takeaway thinking about pros and cons is it really depends what your end goal is. So, we talked at the beginning about people that were like, I want it for employees. I want it for vendors. I want it for consumers. So thinking about that sort of first and foremost. The main, I think, argument against B Corp that a lot of people see and say and talk about is, oh my gosh, it takes so much time. Oh my gosh, it's so much effort to go through. And I say, yes. Wouldn't you want an environmental standard that takes a lot of time and effort to go through? If you're looking at a product And they had to pay money to get this, and they're saying we're socially and environmentally conscious. That doesn't mean as much to me as a company that has spent hours and hours and hours of time and effort to prove that this is true. So it definitely, I cannot lie and say it's easy. It does take a lot of time and effort, but the benefits are definitely there. So I think the people that look at the time and effort see it as a con, but I really see it as a pro because of the certification that you get. It does make you stand out. It is a differentiating factor. The other pro that I think is significant that applies to all B Corps is there's a huge B Corp community. So there's different B local groups. There's now, I think, B Corp industry groups. There's all sorts of different people that are talking both about B Corps and are sharing, this is what we're doing. This is how we developed our employee engagement policy. This is how we developed our supplier policy. There's a big sort of open sense of community that I think is really beneficial, and definitely one of the pros. And then again, a pro and a con, or a con, depending on how you look at it, is a legal change. So some people say, my board is not on board with that. My executive team would never agree to that. It is what it is. But I think it is a pro, and that it's just forcing you to really uphold that standard. So depending how you think about it, if you're weighing sort of, is this right for my business? Is this something I should be thinking about? Make your own pro-con list. Think about the benefits. Think about where you want to be kind of 5-10 years down the road. Okay, my last slide before we get into questions. So I think some people have probably sat here and are like, no way, I'm not doing this. I'm not interested. This is way too much for me. Well, you're in luck, because the B impact assessment, the BIA, is free for anyone to use. So even if you have just started a business, if you just want that pure, what social and environmental benefits are good for my business, you can start the B impact assessment. Any business can do it. And you can do what I like to call DIY points. So maybe 80 is a huge stretch for you. That's fine. You can set your own points goal of 60, or you can say, we're really interested in workers and environment. We're just going to look at workers and environment. Again, you have to hold yourself to the standards. So that's the kind of con of just keeping it yourself. But there are so many resources. Again, it's such a great platform and a way to think about social and environmental impact, things that you want to be doing, and things that you maybe want to do down the road. So even if you think, well, this sounds like a lot of work, I recommend just opening the assessment and figuring out what kind of things those look like for you. And then the other thing, again, even if you're like, well, I don't even want to do the B impact assessment, but I'm curious about how to create a supplier code of conduct. What does a supplier engagement policy look like? B-Lab has resources for that. So any kind of social issue, environmental issue that you think, how would I make this work for my business? There are templates, there are policies. B-Lab has talked about those things and has resources for them. So I would recommend looking at that. And then the last thing is to talk to other companies that are certified. So if you're thinking, maybe next year, maybe 2 years, maybe 4 years, that's fine. Start talking to other people and see what the benefits are. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks for listening for my long thing. I'm gonna stop sharing just so that we can be more kind of chatting here. And then I'll just start going through questions. So bear with me while I scroll up. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. I think that will be easier than trying to unmute. Okay, Paula says 5,000 B Corps globally. Is that true? 5,000? Okay, so even better. So it is, yeah, such a growing thing. Oh, B work. Okay, so this is a great thing that I forgot to mention around hiring. So there is a B Corp job board. So if you want to work at a B Corp, Google it B work, and it shows all the B Corps that are hiring. So that's just another benefit. If you're not a business owner or you don't work in a current B Corp, you can. There's ways to do it. Lily's question, do all states provide for LLCs to be able to be registered? My understanding is no. My understanding is also no. I think it's pretty state to state. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't legally tell you if that is true. But if you go on B Lab's website and select your state, it will say, here's how we work around this, because there's B Corps, I think, in every state. So they have thought through what that looks like for each state. Okay, Michael says 4 to 6 months, an hour a week, several hours per week. Again, it depends, which I know is not a helpful answer. So I can talk through, so a company that has 20 employees, we took about 6 months, and I would say it was like 2 hours a week and then kind of 3 weeks off, and then like an hour a week and a week off, and then 4 hours a week, because the bulk of it is both finding the data and gathering the documentation and or writing the documentation. Sometimes you have to go to your insurance company and say, hi, I need to get this, and then you're waiting a week for them to answer. So I think consistency is just kind of key. And if you can, some people find it helpful to download the Excel just to have a separate way to look at it. And then they're taking notes in there. You can also take notes directly in the assessment. The assessment is yours, where it says comments, right? I talked to so-and-so on XYZ. They said they would get back to me on this day. Or looking at this in XYZ folder. Just use that. Just write comments to yourself to kind of help keep yourself organized. But I think it's more consistency. And once you find out where the documentation needs to come. Allie says, is the assessment publicly available? Yes, it is. Let me put it in the chat just so everybody has it. This is that. Now I'm going to lose my place spot. Okay, perfect. Is it recommended to start the B Corp process as a new business, 1 year into your business and 3 years plus? This is a great question. So B Corp has a new thing called pending B Corps that I will put in the chat too. So pending B Corps are now available if you have less than a year of operations. So you fill out a kind of sample test assessment and say, this is everything we're trying to do in the first year. And then you have to come back after going back and forth with B Lab, and they verify you and certify you, and then you're a full B Corp. So you get that pending status for about a year. Should we do it now? Should we do it in 3 years? I have seen all types. I think it's a cool thing about B Corp and what a lot of companies are realizing, and part of the reason for this pending is a lot of companies are saying, I want to build my company to this standard. As my company grows, as I get more employees, I want to have this at a baseline, so I'm just growing to this standard, which I think is a really great option. Conversely, those startup founders are usually working 100 plus hours a week. So oftentimes the last thing they have time to do is to become pending. So I think there's kind of pros and cons of doing it a year into your business, 3 years plus. It's really what you have time for. And again, what kind of benefits you're hoping to get. If you think that it's going to be a big employee engagement tool or a big hiring feature, and you're going to be hiring 50 more people over the next 2 years, then I would start doing it now. The thing that I think is interesting, I've also seen businesses that are like 20 plus years do it. And sometimes it's easier for them because they're like, we have all these policies in place. They're not writing their employee handbook as they're trying to do B Corp. So it really depends, but it is helpful to kind of think through what the pros and cons are. Jason says, are there B Corp banks? There are B Corp banks. B Corps used to, this is their one website change that I don't like. You used to be able to sort by industry. Now you cannot. But if you Google B Corp bank, a lot will come up. Banks love to talk about with their B Corps. And I recommend, if you're looking for a bank, to use a B Corp. Another question, does the website have resources on the legal and tax implications of B Corp status? The website has, I would say, information, probably not implications. There are a couple of lawyers that I would recommend following on LinkedIn. Be Social Change member Kevin Christopher has a lot of great resources. And Google, I mean, I hate to say Google, but if you Google benefit corporation legal implications, it does not change your tax status. So you don't need a new EIN. It doesn't suddenly make you tax exempt or anything. So there's no tax changes, but there are definitely legal changes. So again, I can't legally tell you anything, but a lot of people have a lot of opinions about benefit corporations versus LLC. Are there ways that a benefit LLC can technically become a B Corp? I'm not sure about that. I think that might be state dependent, but if you have benefit language in your operating documents, in your current legal documents, that will apply. Paula says, yes, B-Lab publishes many handbooks and guides in all areas. So many. They're fantastic. I really recommend looking at them. Okay. Benefit LLCs being accepted as B Corps in the future. Yeah, I think the thing, this is kind of confusing and this could be kind of a rabbit hole. So you can become a benefit corporation without being a B Corp. You cannot be a B Corp without being a benefit corporation. So there are companies that are just benefit corporations that haven't done the B impact assessment, and there's a whole community around there. There's a lot of stuff on there. Marissa says, yes, co-chair B Local NYC. Go check out their resources. That's another great place to learn about B Corps and talk about B Corps. And then Paula, I believe you're B Local Boston. Can you put the information in that? And then if you Google B Local Toronto, fill in the blank, state or city, there are a lot of other things. Hannah says, does it matter if you have offices in the UK, US? There is, so B-Lab is a global standard. So I think, and this is a guess, if you, the HQ will kind of be the point of, that will be your B-Lab that you're interacting with. So if you're in the US, you'll be with B-Lab US and Canada. If you're in the UK, you'll be with B-Lab UK. They will definitely ask you about subsidiaries in different locations, and they'll just check on them and do some of those things. But it shouldn't be a hindrance to your application. Okay, Michael says, what information can be kept to the founder company without needing to submit for the B Corp? Hold on, I'm not gonna read this out loud because I'll get confused, but without needing to submit. Okay, public report. I do get questions about this. Nothing. So if you're worried about your company's private information, trade secrets, B-Lab is not asking about that and it's not publicizing it. So if you Google, Michael, go look at like Google Athleta B Corp, B-Lab, and on B-Lab's website, it will show you an example of what the report is and the public information that's shared. So it will say, we have X many points in workers, we have X many points in environment, but the report is not, here's this ethical thing or here's this trade secret. Some of the information, yes, it is sensitive. B-Lab's privacy and code keeps all of that within the assessment pretty robustly. So there's nothing that you would be sharing that you would be, it's not like, great, you're a B-Lab, tell us how you did everything. You can still keep stuff like that pretty close. Etsy being a B Corp and then reversing course when they went public. Oh, this is a great topic. So Google this because I will talk about this for the next 20 minutes. So Etsy was a B Corp and then they became public. honestly need to do more research on public companies becoming B Corps. When I was talking earlier about the shareholder versus triple bottom line, a public company is legally saying we are offering shares and we are putting shareholders first. So there's still some discussion. I know there are public companies that are B Corp. Lemonade was able to do it somehow. I think it depends. My guesstimate is that it depends on what your investors want and how your public offering goes. But I think that when they pulled back on being a B Corp, it was because they couldn't say, here's our public offering, here's the shareholders, and then B Corp. So it definitely is a big, Danone is another kind of case study to Google if you're interested in this. But yeah, I think it is just that sort of public shareholder first versus B Corp triple bottom line can definitely be at odds. Okay, some other, B Corp banks, thank you for sharing, Jason. Yes, there's a lot of other resources. Okay, if the application is not accepted on the first try, what's the approximate amount of time the back and forths would add to the timeline? I would say probably 3 to 6 months, because they're going to push you back to the end of the line. So if you can't have the documentation in time, you're going to stay in the verification process, but you're definitely not a priority. So the way to overcome that is to make sure that you're at least 90 points before you submit. How do donations work for B Corp? Is it similar to how a donation is tax exempt? So if you're a B Corp that is making donations, it's the same. If you're an LLC or S Corp or those types of things would be the same. Depending, the other way that I think this question might be is B Lab is a nonprofit itself, which is ironic because you have to be a for-profit business to become a B Corp. If you want to donate to B Lab, they will take your money. That will be tax exempt. So for you operating and donating, it doesn't make a big, there's no tax changes are implicated. Can the B Corp status be revoked? What holds companies accountable to what they promise? So B Corps, if you Google, the name is escaping me. There has been some controversy. When you think about, 5,000 companies, there's going to be some companies that are probably not doing so great. So some companies have had problems and they treat it as B Corp will say, well, we've opened a case and we're looking into this. It's very legal. They won't talk about it. I can't think of an example of something that's publicly has been revoked. I'm sure that it has been true. You do have to recertify every 3 years. So if you think, I'm going to become certified, this is a one and done, awesome. You're in for a long 3 years, because if you want to keep the status, you have to certify every 3 years. The holding accountable, I think it is that documentation. It's the legal status. It's a lot of work to fake something. If you want to talk about your environmental benefits and social benefits, you can just post that on your website. You don't have to go through all this that are fake. There's no accountability outside of B Corp, but I think the way that B Corp is set up, it keeps people pretty accountable. What are some of the better ways to organize, keep tabs on files, proofs, everything involved in the process? I like Dropbox. I just have a folder, Google Drive or Dropbox. I take it a little bit far in that I download the Excel, and then I have a link to where it is in Drive or Dropbox that says this is this. And then once you've uploaded it into the assessment, that kind of keeps tabs on it. So the assessment organizes itself in some ways. And again, that's really, how do you prefer to keep organized? So within Dropbox or Drive, I just like to categorize it by workers, environment, and then it's just whatever policies are in that one. So, Allie says, I'm thinking more about policies changing. after being certified, they change practices. I mean, yeah, I guess if you, again, wanted to be sort of devious, you could say, we're now going to change all these policies. You could do that. Again, you wouldn't become recertified in 3 years. But unless it comes then to like a benefit angle of your board is coming after you, there's nothing to say that you couldn't, after you get certified, then say, we're ripping this up, we're not using it, but you would not recertify in 3 years. One last question. Okay. Is there a comprehensive list of all the questions or somewhere to get a sense if we, so if you, is there a list of all the questions that you asked? So Michael, if you go in and you start an account, you select your industry, your company size, it will sort you into the assessment, and then you can click download at the top, Excel. That's the best way to get the kind of listing of everything.